Recording. Good afternoon, Billy.
Good afternoon, Mr. Banks.
So, for anyone who's watching, this is Bill Smart. He's a legendary face in Manchester.
Well, I let other people say that. It's not something that I would say about myself. And I really appreciate you giving me the chance to just come back and explain who I am.
Yeah.
So, my name's Bill Smart. I was born 29th of the 12th, 1957.
Yeah.
So my journey, as I approach my 70s in the next couple of years, I can honestly say it's been amazing. But it's only in reflection that when I look back, that I see how amazing it has been. And when I was born, I was literally taken from my mother because she was very unwell with a particular illness. And I was taken to a children's home in Dr Barnardos, and it was a country mansion. It was an estate that had been left to Barnardos via a woman called Miss Neal. There was probably about 20 kids lived in the children's home.
Yeah.
And it was idyllic. It was beautiful. Went to the village school. I lived in a house because I was on the estate with the servants' cottages. And so we were put into little groups, and there were 3 girls. They were sisters. They were called the Bromleys, and they were my sisters, I should say. And then I one day, this was probably when I was around about 6. I was sort of taken into the lounge area, and there was a woman there who was stood in front of me. She was light-skinned, she had a big afro, very smart, bat-winged glasses, and then she just came up to me and she went, "I'm your mother."
Wow.
Yeah. And a few days later, I met my little brother, Paul, who'd also been in the home. Mum had been very unwell and she had to go into convalescence.
Yeah.
But fortunately, she's well and she's still with me at the age of 91. And I absolutely adore her from what she's experienced and what we've all experienced. And I just remember turning around, looking at, there was like a window where the stairs went up in the cottage and the 3 girls were sat looking through. And that was quite traumatic because they were they were just tears and tears and tears and tears. And I just remember very, very confused about what was happening. And then we were in the taxi and we arrived at this country station. And it was in the days when there were steam trains. And we ended up going to Birmingham to Manchester. And I can still hear the sound of the and then a few hours later, we were in Manchester, and it was in the day. So where your tram routes are now, that's where the trains used to come down, so to Altrincham. And we went to Trafford Bar.
Yeah.
We had to change, obviously, in Manchester and then get on a smaller train. And then Old Trafford became my home.
Yeah.
And it was in the time when the area, obviously, even though, let's say, 1963, 1964, and the war had finished in 1945, there were masses of areas that had been bombed and there was no redevelopment.
Yeah.
So I initially went to a school called St. B Street, and then from there I went to, I think it was Seymour Park School.
Yeah.
And again, when I'd arrived, I had this accent. And so the other kids, it wasn't like, "Hi, you all right, mate? Nice to see you," type of thing. It was, "Hi, how are you?"
Yeah.
And I could have got battered, but for some reason, I never got any problems off people. Maybe 1 or 2, but it was such a strong community. It was sort of Moss Side and Old Trafford. There was a lot of women that their men were not in their lives. So you were surrounded by 100 aunties. Everybody was auntie this, auntie that. Go to your auntie here, go to your auntie there. And that meant that everybody, their kids were your cousins. That's the only way you could see it. We never wanted for anything. We were dirt poor. I mean, dirt poor. You know, you like my mum would say, can you go around to your Auntie Jean's and just ask her for, 5 shillings? It's like beans on toast. So I was very lucky because my mum worked really, really hard. She'd did 3 jobs, but there was no messing with her. She said, if you want to eat, you're gonna have to learn how to cook.
Yeah.
But we always got, she's always off on a Sunday. We always got the Sunday roast and everything, which we really look forward to. Got fish and chips on a Friday night or a Saturday night, but the rest of the time it was literally, toast in the morning or porridge, and I love porridge. And then you had a school meal. You got your bottle of milk that Margaret Thatcher snatched off the kids. Got to say that. Or an orange juice, and you had a biscuit. School was amazing.
Yeah.
And I had this massive thirst for knowledge. I did not waste my time at school. I read, I was fascinated by history, and sort of like looking back in time, particularly the history of this country. And then I started getting into reading books of all styles. Love philosophy, and I think that's what sort of underpinned things. My friends were all in the similar positions as I was, in respect very limited finance. We used to get our Whit Week clothes.
Yeah.
At Whit Week. I don't know if you remember that.
I found a picture when my dad died. I found a picture of Whit Walks.
The Whit Walks, yeah.
Yeah.
We went on the Whit Walks from...
I might drop that into the video.
Yeah, do.
Yeah.
And then from Old Trafford or from Moss Side,
Yeah.
and the churches would come together. All the girls, bless them, were all in those sticky out frocks, and they were walking down with the banners, the religious banners, and the ribbons on it. And then your family would be stood up the side waiting for you to come down. My mum used to get me. She always got me a really nice shirt, a tie with an elastic on it, and long pants. I was quite grown up, and maybe a jacket or something. But we got that every year. And it was a time that I absolutely loved. It was so smart. So fashion was already starting to take a hold on me.
Yeah.
When I was 9, unfortunately, my mum became unwell again. And for certain reasons, by that time I had a young brother and 2 younger sisters. I had older brothers and sisters, but my youngest brothers and sisters. And we were taken into care. And we were taken into Dr Barnardo's in Southport. Which was a seaside resort, and again it was a beautiful, stunning house in Birkdale, and there was a percentage of kids that were from Liverpool. It was all based around Lancashire, so it was Liverpool Lancs before it was Merseyside, and Preston and other places, and this group of kids that were, when I look back, what underpins how I view life and how I treat people, and especially working in mental health, was the fact that I was navigating myself through kids with trauma.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I had was humour. I was always able to turn something into something funny. So when you have that sort of personality, everybody around you likes you because you make them laugh.
Yeah.
I was a clown.
Yeah.
But being a clown, especially when I was at school, I made sure that I did not affect other people's education. It was always in the playground, it'd be when we were having lunch, and by that time we started to escape the school, and we'd go out to the chippy, because even though I was in care, we always had money. I was working from the age of 8. I had a paper round quite early.
Yeah.
And the kids in the home, you went through all the gamut of emotions. We clashed, we fought, but again there was that universal thing that we're a family, but with a degree of separation, that actually you're not my brother and sister, but to anybody outside, you're my brother and sister. So there was this mass defence of each other.
Yeah.
Nobody could pick on us. School was a school called Christchurch School in Southport. It was an all-boys school, with an incredible reputation in respect of education. And when I was around about 13, I was quite athletic at school. I was a big lad. By the time I was 9, I'd gone through puberty, which is very unusual. So my voice had broken. And I was always a bit taller than my school friends. And I would not allow bullying, you know. And also, I had people before me, particularly I always remember a boy called Mark Nickius and another guy called, I think it was Chris Patrickson, who swam for England. So they were like stars in our eyes. And they were very protective of me as well. So I wouldn't allow bullying, particularly a couple of my friends. One was called Paul, who was very plump. And then another one called John, who had a concave chest. And so he was the butt of everybody's jokes when we were in the gymnasium, you know, when we were doing sports. He wasn't a strong lad, but there was a bully there. And I was terrified of this lad. He was really small, but he was foul, he was vile. And I just saw him one day and I could see the boys terrified in the corner because he was picking on them. And something just snapped in me. And I walked over and I just said, leave him alone. And straight away turned around and said, what's it got to do with you? What are you going to do about it? Not in a Manchester sort of thing. And I just turned around and I was frightened. And if I hadn't have reacted the way that I did, I would have run back and cowered off. But for some reason, something pushed me. And then you get all the boys around you going, fight, 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 fight.
Yeah.
And that just basically, that started everything. What was amazing was that I managed to get hold of this person and put them in their place. I won't go into the details of it. And it took 5 or 6 minutes for the teacher who was running the playground to get over.
Wow.
His name was Mel Freer. He was the art teacher.
Yeah.
And he just stood back because I realised that this could have been stopped in seconds.
Yeah.
But he didn't because he knew that this boy was a bully. And his mother and father, he was from a very wealthy family. They turned up at the school and wanted me to be removed. Yeah. And the principal of the school, Mr. McIntyre, or Dr. McIntyre, turned around and basically said, it's your son that will be going.
Did they?
He didn't go in the end.
Yeah.
But his bullying stopped.
Yeah.
Because everybody realised he was easy to take on.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was that. And my schooling everything was based about getting my O levels and then obviously towards my A levels. I was still in the kids' home and around about the ages of 14, 15, the children's home had to close down. And the issue was around sexual abuse. Now, irrespective of that, the home was amazing. I would say 90% of what underpins me came from the children's home. The 10% that is bad, that did affect me, is something that I had to, over many, many years, deal with and manage psychologically, mentally. But eventually I came out when I was probably around about 13, 14. And I had no choice because people obviously in school had realised that I was different. And it was never vicious, but I'd hear people would say it as I was walking past. I'm not going to use the terminology, but it was obviously that I'm gay. And I just remember running from school. I'd had enough. I was absolutely stressed out. I was distraught. And I ran back. I ended up going to my local church, which was St. Paul's. And the reverend there was the Reverend Selgren and his wife. And I was in the grounds near the vicarage and he came out to see me. And when I was very open with him and I told him what it was, he turned around and said, don't let this define your life at this stage. He used a language which most kids wouldn't understand, but he said, don't let it define you because you don't know what you are at this stage in life. There's so much going on. In fact, was I gone through puberty? If I was going through puberty, then you could put that argument there.
What year would this have been?
Oh, well,
60s?
it would be 1970, around about 1970. Yeah. And I had a really good group of friends at that time, and the way that the school dealt with it and the church dealt with it was incredible. When I look back, they were so ahead of their time. And it was never really discussed after that in school. It was just, you know, I was actually going out with girls as well, but it was just like we're holding hands. It was very juvenile. I I hit the clubs when I was, are you ready for this?
Go on.
When I was about 15.
Yeah.
And because I looked
In
older,
Manchester?
no, in Southport.
Oh, right, yeah.
In Southport, there's a place called the Skatesbrick on Lord Street. And it was a hotel, but there was a bar downstairs and there was a DJ on. And I turned up with these older friends one night. It was a Saturday night. And they said, you won't get in. And I promise you this is true. As they walked to the door, the doorman were like, you're not coming in, lads, you're not coming in, lads. And I was right at the back. So I just walked to the front. As they are being told to go in little groups, they're walking away. And I went to the front. And the guy said, how old are you? And I started laughing. I turned around. I said, I'm married with 2 kids. I swear on my life. And he went, right, mate, in.
And
I just, yeah, and and the door was a revolving door, and I remember going round like that, going, and then I stopped and looked outside at my mates. There were a few inside that had got in. It wasn't just me. But that was a great day on Monday when I told everybody that I got into the Skatesbrick. Yeah. And it was from there that I started coming into sort of like soul and the old soul, the Tamla Motown, and it was sort of the start of what would have been the start of disco, because it didn't just come from nowhere. There were certain styles of music, and I think some people just picked up on it and then took it into another direction. And the one thing I could do was dance. I loved to dance. And
was you self-taught?
Yeah, very much so. And the way that I learned to dance was to watch other people. Yeah. And then I'd go home and I'd see something, a particular move, and I'd go, I'm going to practice that.
So you watch people in the clubs?
Oh, yeah. Like Northern Soul.
Yeah.
When I started going to Wigan Casino, I used to just sit in the background for like an hour and I'd pick out my favourite dancers. I had favourite dancers. Everything I've done, I've gone, I'm having a bit of that. I'm going to have a bit of that. I like that footwork. I like how the arms go here. And I always remember this lad just doing this spin where he just rotated his head and he went round in a spin and sort of went down. It was like quite balletic. So I was having a bit of that as well.
That's something you don't get now in clubs. You don't see. I think it's practicing since rave, really, isn't it? Where people dance with their arms.
Well, that's what someone said, wasn't it? Rave was developed for people who couldn't dance. Yeah. Because all they had to do was just wave their hands.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, listening to you, then you were watching people dancing in clubs, but I can't remember the last time I was in a club. I thought, wow, they're a really good dancer.
Yeah.
But that would have been the norm, wouldn't it, back in the 70s?
And you sort of tend to see people dance now in certain types of club, but they're so packed. It was a great time. Anyway, so Southport really underpinned everything, solidified my personality with time to develop even further. In respect to my sexuality, let's just put that on hold, because I don't think that was part of me at that time. It was just about enjoying life and really getting on with my studies, which I did. I had a period where I was with foster parents after the children's home closed. And I've got to give Barnardos this. This is not the horror stories, although there were some victims that came out of that. What they did do was that they closed the children's home. I was like O-levels or GCSEs as they would be now. And the thing that frightened me the most was having to move at that time. And I was in the boys' brigade, and the captain of the boys' brigade and his wife, who were only 24 and 23, had already come round, and they said, we'll take Bill.
And they were only 24?
3 and 24, yeah. Roy was a heating engineer, and Sue was his wife, and she used to just do the books, and they had 2 sons, Wayne and Nick. And I literally moved in with them, and they gave me the experience of family, because obviously in the kids' home I didn't have that. Beautiful people. And again, when I look back, it's like, I can't believe you took me on, you know. And I had issues as well. I had issues with anger, and that it sort of came out, but they allowed me to bring it out, but they put it in a controlled way. You know, and taught me, you know, you've got the right to be angry, but you haven't got the right to be aggressive with it. So I owe them so much. But to move on in life, I discovered things. So when I was 17, I moved to London, and I lived. This is really, really funny. Again, churches have had a lot of influence in my life for some strange reason. And I stayed at the Oval. There was a church called St Mark's opposite the Oval, and I was placed with Richard Carnot Richard, who was an aristocrat but without a title.
Yeah.
He was the Honourable something, and his wife was called Marigold, and I lived in the vicarage, right? Because we lived in St Mark's. That was it. That was my address. But then I sort of weaved my way out and discovered London, you know, the big bad city full of sin and debauchery. And obviously it was just like, I want a bit of that. I want a bit of that. And I discovered the gay scene in London, and it was the time of disco. And when you could dance, you were the stars, you know, as soon as you got on the dance floor, because a lot of men didn't like dancing, they just sort of, and girls as well. And then all these really flamboyant guys got on the dance floor and started dancing. And at the time I was seeing somebody, and they introduced me to a fashion designer called Gina Frattini, who was a couture designer, but very much late 50s, 60s and 70s. And I worked as basically a gopher. She just had me hanging around the office. So it was a bit of eye candy. She drank neat vodka, which looked like water, with ice, and I'd have to serve her drinks. And her clientele was, you knew when it was somebody really, really famous, because they never said their name, it was always initials. So for example, if it was Princess Margaret, it was PM at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
DOK, Duchess of Kent. QM, Queen Mother.
Yeah.
But I was never allowed in the salon. It was always, there was another area where the seamstresses were. And the woman who led the seamstresses, she would be the person with Gina, and then they would do all the fittings. And that would be it. And I was with her for, not for long, for about 6 to 8 months, but I had a great time with it. She was married to a comedian called Jimmy Logan.
I think I remember that name.
Jimmy Logan, yeah. Really broad, like Glaswegian guy. You couldn't understand a word he was saying. But they were really, really nice to me. And I used to go to, what was the first club I went to? It was called Bangs, which was on a Monday night. And that was my first experience of walking into a club and seeing thousands, like the rave culture, but this is in the 1970s. And on that night, it was it was supposed to be a Roman orgy. Trust me, it wasn't an orgy. It was just certain people came as emperors, warriors, you name it. And I came on as a senator because I had to have it was all velvet and thing, you know, wreath on my head. And it was the night that as I walked in, there was a PA, and the PA was Grace Jones.
Wow.
And that was my first contact with this woman.
What year was that, Bill? Was that like 77?
Yeah, 77, yeah. It was at the time of when she did Livy on Rose.
Like the peak of disco or the start of it?
I think that was near the beginning of it, because everybody was doing it. I mean, obviously she'd been in Jamaica, gone to New York, she went to Paris, became a model, and then she met Jean-Paul Goude, and I think that's when the production changed. So it was European disco, not American disco. And that's why you get things like Livy on Rose. And she was doing things for musicals like What I Did for Love, but put it into a disco. So they were like little anthems that you'd dance to. But my fashion sense was definitely from the King's Road, Chelsea, and around Chelsea, and then the Army and Navy stores. But that's something that I'd carried from earlier years, so like through the punk period. So I didn't really have a home in the sense of style. I would wear anything as long as it looked good. But I did it from a creative point with a limited budget. But we always made sure that we looked good, you know. I got into a relationship with somebody, and unfortunately I decided to terminate that relationship, and I decided to move back. So I went to Southport, and I trained as a nurse in what people would call spectrum nursing, learning disabilities. I did that, and then when I got to the end of that, the thing for caring the community came in and decided to close the old asylums and place a lot of the patients into communities, into community supported living. And I know that that was a good thing, but people needed to remember. I always remember someone saying to me, "You just lifted these people up that had lived in these institutions. They were like little villages. They had their own shops, they had workshops. You know, they were really, really happy. There was horrible things that happened. I do know that from, you know, things that I saw, and I wouldn't allow. And I just kept thinking, this is so sad, but it was the right thing to do, and it would correct itself over years, and it did. And one of the nurses said to me, "Bill, you need to go and do your psychiatric." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Because there's going to be no jobs for learning disabilities nurses. They will probably take the qualification away." So I came to Manchester, returned home back to Moss Side, and I went to North Manchester General Hospital where I did my training in psychiatric nursing. And literally, and I'm going to say this, I left nursing once I qualified. And one of the reasons was I reported a member of staff. I'd walked onto this ward, and without going into too much detail, I heard this patient screaming. He was in the shower room, and he was being whipped with towels, and because he messed himself. And I was so angry, and I went in and I reported it, and nothing was done about it. But what happened was, I was sent to Coventry. It sort of really upsets me still to this day and makes me very angry. I was sent to Coventry, and I was just waiting for my qualification to come through. And I used to go home. I'm a grown man, but I was in tears.
Yeah.
And my mum, again, she turned around and said, "Leave. You've got your qualification. Just leave." But I didn't want to stay in nursing.
Yeah.
And I left, say, on the Thursday, and I can't remember the exact date, but all I know is that the Arndale Centre had just opened, and it was Jeanery, and I went to work in Jeanery, which was great. It was near where Boots is on the first floor, and I worked in there, and then I met Umberto off the radio, Piccadilly Radio,
Yeah.
and he was managing Jonathan Silver's in what's the name of the street on Ridgefield, which is funny enough where Heroes was next door. And I worked in there, and he offered me the job as assistant manager. So that linked me to amazing fashion, but cheap. And then I got a job in the bars. So I worked day and I worked night. I used to work 4 nights a week. So I was pretty flush with money, you know. And because I worked at weekends, I wasn't going out spending. So I used to have a really good night once a month where I'd have a real blowout. I'm trying to get through this whole period, and I worked in Heroes behind the bar, one of the most classic gay clubs ever.
Was you there when Hazel Dean played?
Hazel Dean, one of my favourite records is, what is it? Say It's Gonna Rain.
Right, yeah.
That, I was going to start singing it then. This powerful bassy beat.
And you saw her do that live?
Oh yeah, I met Hazel loads of time. But we had people like Carol Jani. We had her. We had Grace Jones came down one night.
What, Heroes?
Yeah, Grace Jones came down, and the reason she came down was it was the night that she slapped Russell Harty on TV.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so after that, I was in the Millionaire. I used to go to the Millionaire and dance in the Millionaire, and we used to get free drinks. And we never got money, but we got drinks, and sometimes we were allowed to have something to eat, you know, like chicken in a basket, but not in the restaurant, just in one of the side booths. And I was in there, and I can't remember who the DJ was that night, but I have a funny feeling it was John Barry. But whoever it was there. Grace came in, and she came in with this Rastafarian man who was obviously her manager at the time. And he came over and said, because the club was absolutely dead, it was a quiet night. So I don't know if it was like a Monday night or a Tuesday night, but it couldn't have been a Monday night because I worked the Monday night. So it would have been a Tuesday night. Wednesday night was a busy night in Heroes. And I kept saying, go to Heroes. Told them it was a gay club, told them where it was. And I promise you, I ran from that club, because it was behind Lewis's, and got straight to King Street, straight down King Street, turned left, I'm on Ridgevales, went in. Old Joe was on the door, the big Cockney doorman, lovely man. And I said to him, Grace Jones is coming down. Not thinking, he wouldn't have a clue who Grace Jones was. Don't charge her, because I had to run down to tell the bar staff that she's coming in. And anyway, by the time I got upstairs, she was already in. They charged her to come in.
Did they?
Yeah. So I went up to Joe and said, that was Grace Jones, but they mustn't have said it was Grace Jones.
Yeah.
Anyway, they came in, and that was it really. She met the owner of the club and they sort of sat down, drank champagne, you know, the usual. Whereas we just danced on the dance floor and just sort of like staring at her at distance. And that was an incredible experience just to see her so close up. But we had people like Diana Dawes.
Did she go in Heroes?
Yeah, she came. She'd written a book, and so she was talking about her life in film. We had such a variety of artists that came down. I'm just trying to think.
So Diana Dawes wrote a book and then she did like an event.
She went around the country doing a PA. She needed money basically because her career had obviously come to an end. She was an amazing actress, but was never. Everything was about bust, blonde. Jane Mansfield, Marilyn Monroe. She was Britain's version of it. But she was an incredible actress and she wasn't given the chance to become that actress. And it's only when she became older that you actually saw this woman for what she really was. And that was a brilliant actress. And that night, somebody had asked her a question. There was a Q&A. Someone had asked her a question and it was probably one of the most discourteous questions. It was something about her son, Jason. And she just walked off stage.
Did she?
She just walked off stage. Yeah. And everybody around was furious with this guy. Horrible. He was a horrible person anyway. So let's leave that at that. So I worked in Heroes, and in many ways, the working behind the bar was the AIDS period. So I had become aware of AIDS quite early because I'd read it in an article in either the Telegraph or the Guardian. I can't remember what it was. And it was a small article and it was talking about a disease that was affecting young gay men. And the fact was, what was so shocking, it was diseases of older people, end of life. So I remember hearing about that and then gradually how it came into the UK. Because Americans were travelling in. And then I remember seeing the first person that I realised, and it was somebody I knew really, really well. And they were wearing a high collar, and as the collar moved, they had sarcoma. And these were like lesions on the skin, and it was horrendous. And then you started hearing different people's names. Have you heard about so-and-so? Have you heard about so-and-so? You know, and a friend of mine committed suicide when he found out that he'd got the virus. And it absolutely terrified you. So you made sure that in my case, I just made sure that I kept myself more or less to myself for a very long period of time. And I think in many ways, that's really what saved me.